70 years, a lifetime measured in revolutions of the sun, yet a fleeting breath in the grand tapestry of history. These men, no longer boys but etched with the passage of time, carry within them echoes of a world consumed by shadows. Shadows that stretched long and menacing across a continent, threatening to extinguish the very flame of humanity. They stood at the precipice, thrust from classrooms into the crucible of conflict, their innocence sacrificed on the altar of a global struggle. Their youth a fading memory amidst the brutal realities of the final year of a war unlike any other. It wasn't a gradual descent into manhood. It was an instantaneous transformation, from callow youth to hardened soldier, a metamorphosis born of necessity and forged in the fires of adversity. They were so young, so unprepared, yet they were the shield against the encroaching darkness, the unwavering line against the tide of fanaticism. Now, adorned with the silver of age, these survivors dwell amongst us. Their stories, untold or unheard, are precious fragments of a history that threatens to slip from our grasp. Their presence, often unnoticed, is a testament to resilience. They are the quiet heroes who walk through the valley of death and emerged, forever changed yet unbroken. This is a final opportunity, a sacred duty to listen, to truly hear the unvarnished truth, unfiltered by the lens of revisionism, unburdened by the rhetoric of power. Their accounts are not tales of glory, but stark portrayals of sacrifice, not pronouncements of victory, but poignant reflections on loss. It is a narrative woven from the raw threads of experience, a testament to the human spirit's capacity for both unimaginable cruelty and unwavering courage. It's the stark, unadorned reality of survival, etched into the very fabric of their being. The stench of burnt powder, the haunting silence after the storm of battle, the faces of fallen comrades forever imprinted in their minds. These are the indelible marks of a generation forever defined by conflict. The very earth seemed to bear witness. German soil stained crimson, Canadian fields scarred and broken, British landscapes transformed into killing grounds, the air thick with the acrid tang of death. The very essence of existence became a brutal calculus of survival, a desperate struggle against forces both tangible and intangible. The stench lingered, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. The sights, forever burned into their memories, were a haunting reminder of the price of freedom. That was the essence of war, a brutal, uncompromising reality stripped bare of any pretense of nobility or glory. From the storm-swept beaches of a day-long past to the frozen hellscape of the Ardennes, from the relentless push through Europe to the horrifying revelations of Nazi atrocities, their journey was a descent into the heart of darkness. How could humans inflict such pain on others? How could empathy be so utterly extinguished? How could the bonds of humanity be so brutally severed? This is their story, not the sanitized version perpetuated by generals and historians, but the visceral, unfiltered reality as experienced by those who stood on the front lines, those who faced death and destruction head-on. This account relies not on grand pronouncements, but on the intimate details, the individual sacrifices, the moments of camaraderie, the quiet acts of heroism that define their struggle. Tony Jesus, a name whispered with reverence, a hero still awaiting recognition, a life forever marked by sacrifice. This narrative will seek to reconstruct their experiences not through sterile reenactments, but through authentic visual representations wherever possible. Where original footage exists, it will be presented to illuminate the brutal landscape of conflict. Where archive footage falls short, visual depictions will be used sparingly, respectfully, to illustrate the stark reality of their experiences, to convey the true weight of their burdens. Real weapons, real settings, not for glorification, but for understanding, for empathy. This, then, is the story of the final year of a world consumed by war. It is a story told not through the detached pronouncements of generals or the calculated analyses of historians, but through the voices of those who lived it, breathed it, and survived it. These are the last heroes, their voices now carrying the weight of history, their stories echoing through the corridors of time, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. It is a call to remember, to learn, and to ensure that the lessons of the past are never forgotten, to forever be vigilant against the forces that threaten to plunge the world into darkness once more. The defining characteristic of an inexperienced combatant thrust into the unforgiving theatre of war lay not in bravery or skill, but in the squalid, brutal conditions they were forced to endure. Their lives were reduced to a relentless cycle of survival, days and nights spent clinging to existence within the confines of hastily dug foxholes, their bodies perpetually damp, their spirits slowly eroding under the constant threat of annihilation. December 1944. The Ardennes forest, a desolate expanse bordering the German frontier, became the stage for their desperate struggle. 19-year-old Private Arnold Whitaker, fresh from the tranquil landscapes of Michigan, found himself entrenched in this frozen wasteland, his foxhole a temporary sanctuary against the storm of war. To ward off the creeping despair, they busied themselves with the mundane, transforming their shallow burrows into marginally more habitable spaces. They widened and deepened their foxholes, a Sisyphean task in the unforgiving earth, each shovelful a small victory against the encroaching enemy, each inch of progress a testament to their will to survive. With resourcefulness born of desperation, they scavenged for scraps of straw, padding the bottom of their frigid shelters, a meagre attempt to insulate themselves from the bone-chilling cold that permeated every fibre of their being. The irony was not lost on them. These crude shelters, painstakingly crafted for survival, bore an uncanny resemblance to the dimensions of a casket. Pin-up girls, images of Betty Grable and Rita Hayworth, became their talismans. Pasted onto the makeshift walls of their foxholes, they were flickering reminders of home, of beauty, of a life beyond the horrors of war. These were not mere decorations. They were anchors, grounding them to the world they were fighting to protect, fragile beacons of hope in the all-encompassing darkness. They even carved niches into the earth, designed to hold their canteens, a testament to their dedication to even the most basic of comforts, even in the face of imminent danger. It was an act of defiance, a small assertion of humanity in a world determined to strip them of their individuality. Arnold, plucked from the familiar landscapes of Michigan, had never ventured beyond the borders of his homeland. Yet, soon after the completion of basic training, he was thrust directly into the heart of the European conflict. There was no acclimatization, no gradual introduction to the horrors of war. It was a baptism by fire, a brutal immersion into a world where survival was a daily battle. The transition was immediate, jarring, and irreversible. His first night on the front lines was a cacophony of explosions, the terrifying shriek of tree bursts, the earth-shattering impact of mortars, the whistling descent of moaning minis, Nebelwerfer, the dreaded 88s. The forest became a deadly maze, the trees exploding into showers of razor-sharp shrapnel, hot, ragged metal raining down, inflicting grievous wounds. The air saturated with the acrid smell of burnt powder and the metallic tang of blood. The explosions ripped through the trees, scattering deadly fragments in all directions. The men were vulnerable, exposed, and helpless against the indiscriminate fury of the enemy artillery. The splinters rained down like poisoned darts, tearing through flesh and bone. Many of the soldiers were maimed, their bodies riddled with shards of metal. One particularly violent explosion ripped Arnold's helmet from his head, sending his rifle flying into the darkness. He was disoriented, vulnerable, exposed. A 19-year-old, groping in the darkness on his hands and knees, his helmet and rifle gone, he was rendered utterly defenseless. Without his helmet, without his rifle, he was nothing more than cannon fodder, a disposable pawn in a vast, impersonal game of war. It was a stark realization. In that moment he understood the true meaning of vulnerability. Yet, in that same moment, he became a veteran, initiated into the brutal reality of combat, marked forever by the horrors he had witnessed and the fear he had endured. The laughter that followed was a nervous release, a desperate attempt to mask the terror that still gripped his heart. The Allied forces, having endured the carnage of the beaches of Normandy, the brutal urban warfare of Arnhem, and the relentless pursuit of the retreating German army, had reached the culmination of their long and arduous journey. The front lines stretched from the northernmost reaches of Holland, winding its way south to the mountainous terrain of Switzerland. The objective was clear: to breach the Siegfried Line, a formidable network of fortifications spanning 400 miles, the final barrier protecting the heart of Germany. But the path to victory was fraught with peril, and the price of success would be measured in blood and sacrifice. The fighting was concentrated in the densely forested region of the Ardennes, a landscape of rolling hills, deep valleys, and impenetrable forests that became a battleground of unimaginable ferocity. Nature itself seemed to conspire against them. Winter was closing in, with a cold wind and sparse snowflakes. The flakes became pellets, precursors of the winter to come. It was turning into the coldest winter on record. The weather became a weapon. The elements themselves turned against them, adding another layer of suffering to their already unbearable existence. The biting wind and relentless snow transformed the battlefield into a frozen wasteland. The logistical challenges became insurmountable. Delivering vital supplies to the men on the front lines became an almost impossible task. Roads became impassable, vehicles became immobilized, and the lifeline between the soldiers and their support system was severed. They were stranded, isolated, and forced to endure unimaginable hardships. The men were ill-equipped for the extreme conditions. Lacking proper winter gear, they were forced to battle not only the enemy, but the elements themselves. They weren't equipped properly, only having heavy overcoats. When the coat got wet, it weighed a ton. They put plastic raincoats over them, which made movement difficult. The damn heavy overcoat, once soaked with rain or snow, became an unbearable burden, weighing them down, restricting their movement, and contributing to their growing exhaustion. In an act of desperate improvisation, they liberated white parkas from captured German soldiers, a pragmatic solution to a life-threatening problem. This wasn't theft, it was survival, a desperate attempt to mitigate the effects of the brutal cold, a necessary act of self-preservation in a world where survival was the only imperative. After liberating Germans, they would take their parkas, pile caps and everything, as they had found out that they all had come to the rear, but the guys in the rear kept them all. The irony was not lost on them. Those in the rear, far from the dangers of the front lines, were hoarding the very supplies that could save their lives. The soldiers of the 82nd Airborne, upon being relieved and sent to the rear, took matters into their own hands, violently confronting those who were comfortably ensconced in safety, wearing the very gear that was desperately needed on the front lines. The temperature dropped to unbearable levels, turning their already meagre rations into frozen blocks. The wooden spoons provided with their K-rations shattered upon impact, rendering them useless. They took sterling spoons and carried them in our pockets. Hygiene became a forgotten luxury. The lack of sanitation led to widespread outbreaks of dysentery, adding another layer of misery to their already unbearable existence. If you had the gold and artillery shells were coming in, if you head up to something in your pants or you wet your pants. In other words, the decision was based on life or death. Mother Nature had to wait. Even the act of digging foxholes, a fundamental act of self-preservation, proved to be futile. The German artillery shells exploded in the trees above them, showering the forest floor with lethal splinters. Digging was useless. The German shells exploded in the trees above them, and lethal splinters shattered everywhere. There was no escape, no refuge from the indiscriminate fury of the enemy artillery. Most of the time, airbursts caused multi-wounds in all sorts of places. You'd get limbs being ripped. The very act of seeking shelter became a deadly gamble. The forest itself became a death trap. 16 years of age, a life barely begun, yet Bill Edwards was thrust into the heart of a brutal war. Driven by a sense of duty and a desire to serve, he lied about his age to enlist, becoming a stretcher-bearer with the 1st Battalion Worcestershire Regiment. His mission was to retrieve the wounded, to offer comfort amidst the carnage. Now working in a munitions factory, Bill Edwards lied about his age to join up. He was now a stretcher-bearer with the 1st Battalion Worcestershire Regiment. He became a witness to unimaginable suffering, a silent observer of the horrors inflicted upon the bodies and souls of his fellow soldiers. He recounted the story of a fellow soldier, a man he knew well. His entire back was skinless, from neck to waist. He was in agony, pleading for release. I remember one guy I knew quite well, and the entire back was skinless from neck to waist. He was in a lot of trouble, a lot of agony. Bill, despite the futility of the situation, administered morphine, a temporary respite from the unbearable pain. There's no chance of covering the wound, it was too big. I gave him morphine and a couple of doses, and he was pleading with me to shoot him, so I had to say to him, "Sorry, mate, that I haven't got a weapon, I can't do that." In any case, I couldn't do it because you're going to be all right, are you lying through your teeth, because... The soldier begged Bill to end his suffering, to grant him the mercy of a quick death. Bill, despite his own youth and inexperience, refused. He could not bring himself to take a life, even one racked with unbearable pain. He lied, offering false assurances, clinging to a sliver of hope, knowing full well that the soldier's fate was sealed. He knew he wasn't going to be all right. The weight of that decision, the burden of that lie, would stay with him forever. A poignant reminder of the limitations of compassion in the face of unimaginable suffering. Carl Beck, also 17, also fueled by youthful idealism, lied about his age to join the 101st Airborne Division, eager to fight for his country. His weapon of choice was a machine gun, a symbol of power and destruction. I was a slick-sleeve private machine gunner, and I'll let you know, and it wouldn't hardly let anybody carry that machine gun. In fact, I had a stencil made, and I have potentialed the side of that machine gun along the receiver. I called it Jiving Joan, and that was a little lady that I knew back in my high school days. He even personalised his weapon, stenciling the name Jiving Joan, a high school sweetheart, onto the receiver. It was a small act of defiance against the dehumanising forces of war. Carl, alongside Jiving Joan, had fought his way from the Normandy beaches, enduring countless battles, facing unimaginable dangers. He had seen death and destruction on a scale that no young man should ever witness. Now, bogged down in a freezing forest, facing yet another brutal battle, he found himself grappling with the psychological toll of combat, the constant fear, the unrelenting stress, the erosion of his own humanity. In one stark moment, Carl was given a moment of respite. He told an assistant gunner to man the machine gun as he went to get mail. Well, this kid had a package, and by this time getting all the way from the States, it was pretty beat up to begin with, and I had all this mail and stuff heading back for the whole group came in, and when it did I hit the ground, and when I did that package came the rest of the way open in this pecan bar to make them here in South Georgia. They're very high calorie, they're just delicious. Came flipping out of it, and you see you just lose all sense of morality, because I knew my instinct told me that that kid was dead, so I picked up that bar and ate it. A barrage of artillery fire rained down. When Carl returned to the hole, he found his assistant gunner dead. He couldn't even remember the assistant gunner's name. A package lay open, with pecan bars. Driven by hunger, he ate a bar, knowing his assistant gunner was dead. And sure enough, when I got back to the hole, he was dead. That I can't even remember his name and don't remember. That's what combat does to you. You live like an animal, and you react like an animal. Yes, then you get over it when you get back to civilization and, I used to wake up in the night and say, here they come in. I'd catch myself, but I've sort of outgrown it by now. And you never forget it. You don't want to do it again, but you just never forget it. That was what combat did to you. Years later, he would still wake up in the night, still haunted by the memories of war, still grappling with the psychological scars of combat. The winter of 1944 was the coldest in decades. The Allies, despite their relentless advance, were facing exhaustion. They were losing on both fronts. Hitler, desperate to reverse the tide of the war, gambled everything on one last audacious offensive. He secretly amassed troops and armour behind the Western Front, preparing for a surprise attack that he hoped would shatter the Allied lines and turn the tide of the war. On December 16th, 1944, the German forces launched a massive counterattack through the Ardennes forest, pushing the Allied lines back into Belgium, creating a bulge in the front lines that would give the battle its name, the Battle of the Bulge. Music. Instead of chasing a retreating army, suddenly exhausted Allied soldiers were up against Germany's most experienced and reinvigorated units. When an Allied division was overrun, young veteran Arnold Whittaker and his battalion were sent in to help. The battle raged with unrelenting ferocity, the frozen landscape becoming a killing ground. The exhausted Allied soldiers, expecting to continue their advance, found themselves facing a renewed and determined enemy. The element of surprise was on the German side. Arnold Whittaker, fresh from his harrowing experiences on the front lines, found himself thrust back into the fray, his battalion sent to reinforce the beleaguered Allied divisions. The landscape was desolate, covered in a thick blanket of snow, the air thick with the stench of death. When we got there, it was covered with snow, and then when you got closer, there would be a hand sticking out here, or an M1 there. We were concerned that with all the snow we were getting, that the quartermaster wouldn't find him until spring. So what we did, we took the M1 and put the bayonet on it and stuck it in the ground, so the soil would stand up that high, so the quartermaster would know that there's a dead GI there, because after a while, with enough snow, there weren't mounds foreign. The snow obscured the fallen, turning the battlefield into a mass grave. Arnold and his comrades were concerned that the bodies of the fallen would be lost, buried beneath the snow, forgotten until the spring thaw. They marked the locations of the dead, planting rifles with bayonets fixed in the ground. It was a grim task, a macabre ritual of remembrance, a testament to the respect they held for their fallen comrades. The counterattack had caught the Allies completely by surprise. The Germans were racing to control the small market town of Bastogne, a vital crossroads with 7 major highways converging at its centre. The generals knew the Germans had to be stopped. All leave was cancelled. Bastogne was key. Lieutenant Frank Gregg of the 101st Airborne Division was on a 3-day pass in Reims when the runner came. Down, and it says the colonel wants to see you right away, so I took off rubbed the road. I knew something was serious, and he says we are moving out as soon as we can load the trucks which are coming in now and going to a town called Bastogne because we got to get there before the Germans do. All leave was cancelled, and he and his men were ordered to deploy immediately. A runner summonsed him, his brief respite cut short. The urgency in the colonel's voice conveyed the gravity of the situation. They were ordered to move out immediately, to reinforce Bastogne, to prevent the Germans from seizing the town. The men of the 101st Airborne Division prepared to set off for Bastogne, ill-equipped, undersupplied, and facing an uncertain future. They were driven by a sense of duty, a commitment to their comrades, and a determination to stop the German advance. With easy company was 20-year-old at Shame Cigar and trucks with the equipment that we did not have. Nothing. We had almost nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. We had no overcoats, we had no overshoes, we had no gloves. I didn't know where we were going, well, what we were going to do there. We drove all night up the French highway, the Belgian highway. We pulled into a big barnyard. Clemence's, get your troops off and come daylight. I want you to get up this road here. You run into the Germans and stop them, say yes, sir. They were attacking with divisions, the Germans were, and I had one rifle company with about 100 men. They were rushed into trucks, with little more than their rifles and the clothes on their backs. Lacking proper winter gear, they were unprepared for the brutal conditions that awaited them. They drove through the night, their destination unknown, their mission unclear. They arrived at a barnyard, exhausted and disoriented. They were attacking with divisions, the Germans were. The men were told to deploy and stop the Germans. 100 men against several divisions. The Germans began to close in on Bastogne. The American troops defending the city were outnumbered and outgunned. We were encircled the minute we got there, and our whole medical company that was on the tail end of the command was cut off. They were captured. The whole command, the whole medical unit. The Germans were all around everywhere, 180,000 Germans, and that's where we fought. The German army began to close in on the troops defending Bastard. Easy Company was encircled upon arrival. They were cut off. The Germans were all around. Medical supplies were cut off. Refugee Gs were coming into Bastille from the way I was going, and I knew what that meant. The Germans worked very far behind. Refugees flooded into Bastogne, signalling the Germans' proximity. There come the Germans over the hill, so we ran together on the side of this hill, and I deployed my men on both sides of the road. The Germans deployed them in on both sides of the road, and we fired at each other for the rest of that afternoon foreign. The Germans attacked, the men deployed, and began to fire. Bastogne was under siege for days. The weather prevented any air support or supply drops. The 101st was surrounded and cut off. Dug into a foxhole with Jiving Joan, his trusty machine gun was Private Carl Beck. We were 17 or 18 years old, and the thing that you feel, of course, is a little bit of fear, pretty much of the unknown, but the greatest fear to me, and I'm sure I expressed this for my comrades, the greatest fear for me was to let my friends down. Fear was the unknown, but the greatest fear was to let his friends down. The company commander, named Hilton, said to get his machine gun and fire, which he did. The idea was to get interlocking machine gun fire. Carl looked out the next morning and the Germans hanging over the barbed wire fence, trying to get through, and that those guys next to me did a good job of stopping them. Oh gosh, they must have killed. I must have been 25 people hanging over those fences the next morning. They did their job of stopping the German. When we killed these dramas, it was no need to do anything with them because they froze up like a block of ice hearties as granted. And if they came up to us, we dropped them, wrote then Frank in front of our foxholes. We couldn't sure as hell wasn't going to move them, so we used them as a table. What the hell or something to sit down on, they were warmer than the damn snow. The bodies of the German froze and became solid. The corpses became tables. The temperature dropped below freezing and with thick fog. The Americans were unable to send in supplies. We were hurt, you're cold and hungry and wet, but you still go and go and go. The men were cold and hungry. Oh, it was brutal. We ran out of food and we were just about out of ammunition. They were out of food and ammunition. When we got a break in the weather and some C-47s came in and threw out buckles, one of my squad leaders came to me and said, "Lieutenant, you have a..." And at that time I had burlap on my feet and I had nothing. I had a pair of gloves that was taken off of a German soldier that had no fingers in it, and I had no hat. I had my helmet, of course, had no scarf and certainly no coat. I said, my God, somebody sent me a scarf or a hat or pair of gloves. I couldn't wait for the package. And when he gave me the package, it was about 2 inches by 2 inches and about 8 inches long, and I opened it up, and that was a fountain pen, just what I needed. When there was a break in the weather, supplies came in, and an officer received a package. The package was a fountain pen. Finally, on December the 26th, the US Third Army broke through to relieve Bastogne. After the US Third Army broke through, Ed, Frank and Carl had been part of the US forces who'd successfully held off the German army. For those who fought at the siege of Bastogne, they never felt they were rescued. We were glad to get relieved, believe me, but rescued we were not because we were still full of fight and to prove it. We moved on into the Bojack Wood and took them on again. Those who fought at the siege never felt rescued but continued the fight. A week into the Battle of the Bulge, the Allies were losing hundreds of men a day. As the dead and injured were taken away, young, inexperienced replacements were rushed to the front to take their place. The Allies were losing hundreds of men a day, and replacements were being rushed to the front. Meant to Norm by their first name 2 days later, they're dead. They were talking about 70% turnover all the time. If we had an 8-man squad, which is supposed to be 12, we thought that was a big deal. They just killed us all the time. The replacements were killed and there was a 70% turnover rate. Bill Ryan saw many of these green troops join his unit. They sent in so many new replacements and they didn't know nothing. I can remember the first sergeant coming around asking, "Hey, remember this guy to come in last night? You know what his name is?" They didn't even know what his name was, crying out loud. That's how these casualties was. The replacements were killed so quick in the Battle of the Bulge because you got to pick them up in the morning, reporters signed and joined, and the first side just pulling his hair out because he didn't even know the names of these guys. The replacements didn't know anything and were killed quickly. Gil Nelson was sent out with his company, and what he thought was a training exercise, suddenly a single rifle bullet went over my head, and the next thing, German machine guns. We had never heard a German machine gun before. We had lots of practice in under American machine guns, which went boom, 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 boom. But there's absolutely no comparison between what the German machine gun sounds like in ours. It's like a string of Chinese firecrackers that rapped very rapid and their snaps over your head. Gil Nelson's company was sent on an exercise that turned out to be a battle. The sound was deafening. It made me very, very frightened. There were so many bullets going over our heads, so much mayhem sound, the sight of blood, the death of people, the screams. Not long after arriving on the battlefield, many of Gil's troop were either killed or wounded. Baptism of fire was a major thing, and it forced me to think what life was all about. Foreign. Bullets, death, and screams forced Nelson to think about life. With so many inexperienced soldiers coming forward, the front line descended into disarray. Hitler issued orders to create fear and terror and cause chaos amongst the Allies. Germans dressed in American uniforms, misdirected traffic, changed road signs, and cut telephone lines foreign. Hitler issued orders to create fear and chaos with Germans in American uniforms. Had lived in the United States at one time, they knew about Lou Gehrig, and they knew about the Yankees and the Giants, and as that word got around that we were being infiltrated, any little sound that you heard you just automatically assumed it was somebody sneaking up on you, so the nervousness increased and no one could be trusted. Security was tightened. Passwords issued password that night was jingle bells. Infiltration created fear and nervousness. So I'm hollering. I'm hollering jingle bells, and then there's shots come over my head and I'm getting down and yelling all of them, and for Christ's sake, get down. So I crawled a little bit forward and I knew it was British and I'm yelling jingle bells, and then I'm thanks for Christ's sake. And finally some guy in a red beret got up from behind a truck or something rather and said, "It's the bloody Canadians." So I said to the 6th man I had with me, "Come on, follow me and we'll get up to the British lines." And there was an officer there from the 8th Battalion. He had a smile on his face. And I said, "For Christ's sake, what are you shooting at us for?" And he said, "You didn't give the right first password." And I said it was changing. And he said it was good. And it was changed. It was jingle bells was yesterday today. It's Joe Brook or something. A soldier was shot at after using the wrong password. It was changed. With everyone on edge looking over their shoulders, stories spread of atrocities committed by German troops. Rumours of atrocities committed by Germans spread. Then, on December the 17th, in the Belgian town of Malmedy, an SS Panzer division took a whole American battery prisoner. Many were found lying in the snow shot in the back of the head. What was it? 800 was killed, and it went down to about 80. SS Panzer division took American prisoners and shot them in the back of the head. To this day, I don't think they really know how many actually, because the body froze over, and they had to wait till it thawed out to pick them all up, but the word spread to the infantry immediately that the SS had massacred these people in Malmedy. So the word went out unofficially, "Don't take any prisoners if we were out on patrol to capture prisoners for interrogation. Yeah, we didn't kill them, but if they came in close and everything and they tore their rifle down, we shot him." After the Malmedy massacre, the order went out to not take any prisoners. Ed Shames remembers when Easy Company captured a group of Germans. We determined who was the leader of the group. We asked him to give us the information. We want to know where more of the Germans in American uniforms were, because that was necessary to save our skins, if you know what I mean. And we said we will give him 5 seconds to answer the question. and if he didn't, we was going to blow his brains out, and in some cases we blew his brains out. I said, after that we had no problem at all getting all the answers we wanted. When Easy Company captured Germans, they were tortured and killed for information. At 16, Harley Reynolds left his family to join the army he'd seen action in the deserts of North Africa and fought his way through Europe. With his company, Harley was now deep in the Hurtgen forest. During the night, the Germans called us by surprise, and they had developed a flare gun. But instead of a flare, it shot a grenade. Now this is close quarters. You're talking about 20 to 30 yards, but that was one wicked thing, and it's our first time to ever run up against it. Germans surprised the men in the forest with a flare gun that shot grenades. It sounded like buses or trucks or something being thrown, or an explosion to go off that close to you. It makes you like a piece of jelly. It goes through you, and you have to recover for this, and everything has to settle back into place, realign itself before you can even move, and they just slaughtered us. The grenades caused slaughter. I was one of 13 men left standing from the battalion. The rest of them were either captured, wounded, or lay dead in the forest, snow-scared or afraid. Only 13 men were left standing. That's not the word for it. I wish I had a good description of fear. I don't know if I could describe it as there's a good fear, and bad fear is a good being that you become numb to where you're able to function under these threats of death. He couldn't describe fear. Having witnessed the massacre, Harley was taken off the front line after 2 years of fighting. He was eventually sent home. I topped the rise where I could see the house, and my dad had finished this house. He had started it before I left home. Harley was taken off the front line and sent home. And he had finished this house. I could see it. And when I spotted the house, there was one of my sisters that was on the front porch, and she saw me top that rise and recognized me immediately, and she let out a scream, and I can hear all the way back in Virginia, even now, that Harley's home visit, both parents and my 3 sisters were home. They came running to meet me. His sister screamed, and his family ran to meet him, and my father's first words were, "Well, son, maybe we can get a good night's sleep now, foreign." His father said that maybe they could get a good night's sleep now. By 1945, the Allies began to claw back the ground. As they'd lost in the Battle of the Bulge, thousands moved forward, pushing the Germans back foxhole by foxhole. In 1945, the Allies pushed the Germans back, foxhole by foxhole. Clayton Bird woke up one morning and realized that his regiment was gone. We woke up the next morning, and the normal tactic is to check the people on your right, check the people on your left to make sure they're still there. And we did both of those things, and there was nobody there, and we realized that all of a sudden we were behind what had suddenly become the German front line, all by ourselves. Lonesome, probably with a day's supply of food, water and ammunition, we realized that we were cut off from any friendly force, no radio, no way of communicating. They were behind the German front line with no communication. During the night their division had been attacked, and forced to withdraw in the confusion, Clayton was one of 26 men. Left behind, forgotten by the others, each of our families received telegrams from the War Department that we would either have been captured, annihilated. The families were notified that they were missing in action. We wondered, what do we do now? They wondered what to do. And we saw a number of American soldiers last to trees. Your body slashed the trees, and they had been abused, used as target practice. And we realized that would be our lot if we had surrendered 2 of them, and we decided that because of that we would fight to the last man. They saw American soldiers who had been killed and decided to fight to the last man. There's a sense of peace about it. We weren't having to make that decision again tomorrow. We decided to damn it. We were going to do what was necessary. The next morning at daylight, a platoon of Germans stumbled into us. Having no idea we were there, we wiped them out. Then when they knew we were there, they attacked us one day across a 500-yard area flat country, which was a stupid tactical blunder. We mowed them down. Then they tried to do the same thing at night and put up a flare just before they got to us, so that they could see to wipe us out well by mistake. They sent the flare up with him, steal 7,500 yards or so out, and we used the flare to mow them down. They wiped out a platoon of Germans and mowed the rest of them down. We hadn't eaten for a week. Every shot that we fired had to have a specific target, because we didn't have ammunition to waste for 7 days. Clayton and his small group of men managed to hold off an overwhelming force of Germans when Allied troops finally advanced through the forest. Clayton and his men were discovered. We got credit for so upsetting the Germans. They didn't know where the front lines really were, so they sure wasn't expecting front lines in our area. We had trusted each other, and we knew if we were all going to go down, we'd go down together, and I'm proud of that group of people. Clayton and his troop managed to hold off an overwhelming German force, and were discovered and were decorated. By the 28th of January 1945, the Allies had recaptured all the territory lost to the Germans. The Battle of the Bulge was over. Now they could concentrate on breaking the